Welcome back, everyone. Well, it seems like a lot of people enjoyed the BlueJay reaction yesterday, so we're going to go back to his channel again today. Had a bunch of comments telling me you got to check out his How to Survive the Wild West video. So just a disclaimer, if you saw yesterday's video or if you saw my warning, if you are not interested in something that might potentially be a little off color or not so family friendly, his videos tend to be just that. So fair warning before we get into this one today. The link is in the description to the original content. I'll also put some links down there to some of my other BlueJay reactions that I've done over time. I want to give a shout out to Ashley in Louisville, Kentucky, who is a producer level patron, as well as Hina in Gentry, Arkansas, an executive producer level patron. I did update the end screens. So if you are at one of those two levels and you don't see your name, or you want me to change how it's listed, shoot me a message on Patreon and I will update that as soon as possible. Gonna be out of town a couple of days this week, so hopefully try to record ahead of time, get some stuff done for you guys. But there may be some gaps in the days depending on how things go. But with all of that said, the Wild West, I don't know exactly what he's gonna cover in this video. It's an area of history that I wouldn't call myself any kind of an expert on. I'm interested in it, and I've learned some things along the way, and I've had the chance to visit places like Lincoln, New Mexico, which is where much of the Billy the Kid story takes place. I've been to Tombstone, Arizona, and if you're familiar with the Wild West, you know the whole Tombstone connection. Pretty fascinating stuff. My mom lives out there. She lives in Tucson, so let's dive in and see what this is all about.
Do you ever throw hogtied civilians on a train tracks in Red Dead Redemption and find yourself thinking, haha, I love the Wild West? Well, you're stupid. Firstly, because Red Dead Redemption takes place over a decade after the Wild West, silly goose. And secondly, because life in the American frontier was far from the bank robbing, gun flourishing, root tootin' wonderland we've all come to know and love in today's pop culture. But what if you just so happen to be best friends with an 80-year-old theoretical physicist who got stranded in 1885 and needs you to take his EPA-violating time machine built out of a stupidly overhyped car to rescue him from your high school bully's great-grandfather?
It's the Back to the Future timeline. And I read the other day that if Back to the Future took place today, they would be going back to 1993, which is my sophomore and junior years in high school were 1993. That freaked me the heck out because I was 16 in 1993. Holy cow, that's crazy.
Don't you worry, kiddo. Seeing as how the situation is all too likely, I decided to put together a little guide for all you McCree wannabes to show you exactly how to survive the Wild West. Here we are, Alex, the Wild West, the area of the United States that's vaguely defined by historians as being somewhere. The stunning landscapes are crawling with rich resources. Massive herds of American bison roam from the Great Basin to the Appalachians, while the expansive flatlands find themselves home to enough corn, beans, and squash to bring a tear to any Midwestern grandmother's eye. The geography ranges from grassy plains so large you might just call them great, to mountains so rugged you could even say they're rocky, to deserts so arid they've earned the rank of being the second hottest place on Earth. Second only to Markiplier's OnlyFans.
I was just going to say, Death Valley's the hottest place on Earth. Wait, Markiplier doesn't actually have an OnlyFans, does he? It's kind of disturbing if he does. My daughter really likes him. She loves his voice. She thinks it's kind of really hot and things like that. But yeah, it's a fascinating place to travel to. It's beautiful in the West, but it is also very rugged. And people don't realize that even some of the areas that are high in elevation, like Denver, Colorado, Denver's not in the mountains. It's near the mountains. You can see the mountains from Denver, but where Denver is, it's super flat. It's just that the elevation has gone up and up and up to where it's a mile above sea level in a flat area that's right at the foot of where the mountains begin. Gorgeous places, though.
And, of course, to accompany all these diverse ecosystems and resources are an equal number of diverse American Indian cultures to live off them. Oh my gosh, this is beautiful. You're right, this is not how I pictured the Wild West at all. So do I just, like, get my
before we got there
chief or... Nah, hold up. Don't go all dances with wolves quite yet, Alex. This piece of junk took us too far back. Just gotta calibrate this flux bullshitator. Okay, good to go. Hop in. Ah, that's more like it. Welcome to the Wild West. Despite its long-standing history, the archetypal Wild West period refers to only a small stretch of time between the end of the Civil War to the 1890 census, or the early 1900s, depending on which smart people institution you ask.
And the 1890 census, if you're interested at all in family history and researching, you know that the United States took a census every 10 years. I think the UK does that too, but theirs happened like the next year after. So like if ours is in 1910, theirs was 1911. But a couple of interesting things about the census. Number one, it didn't start listing every person in a household until 1850. So the 1840 census, you're going to see the head of household and then a bunch of brackets like how many males 16 to 25, how many males 40 and over, things like that. How many females 16 to 25, how many females under 5, that kind of stuff. So you can kind of infer if you know a little bit. And then, of course, there was also what was called the slave schedule, where it would list slave owners and then how many slaves they owned and what the gender and age of those people were. And then the 1890 census actually was almost completely destroyed in a fire. So there are very few bits of the 1890 census left. But there was also a supplemental census in 1890, which was a veterans census. Any Union veteran was recorded along with what unit they were in and the dates that they served to and from, like their muster in and muster out dates. So it's a great resource for that. And it even sometimes lists down at the bottom if they have any illnesses, because they were trying to get information for the Pension Bureau.
But now we're standing on brand spanking new American territory, baby. Which was taken from Mexico and France. Who took it from Spain? Who partially took it from France? Who took it from the natives we just met? But still pretty new. Go on, taking a deep breath of freedom.
And to be fair, and there's plenty of criticism to go around for European powers coming in and conquering this land, but these various tribes, these Native American tribes, were hardly a united group that were just taken advantage of by Europeans. They were at war with each other. They allied with each other. They did the exact same kinds of things that European powers did to each other. They just didn't have the same sense of kind of ownership and territory that necessarily European powers ended up having.
What happened to them? You happened, Alex. Me, but I just got here.
Why does he keep calling him Alex? Is he confusing the character of Marty McFly, which is the character that Michael J. Fox plays in Back to the Future, with Alex Keaton, which was his character in Family Ties, in Ohio, by the way?
Sure did, and in record time too, thanks to your shiny new railroad system. A life-altering technological leap forward in rural transit, sure. Perfect for manifesting destinies and kickstarting Dust Bowls.
So two huge things happened in the 19th century that transform travel and communication. You've got, well, there's a number of them, but you got the telegraph, which vastly speeds up how quickly information can get from one place to another, right? Because instead of having to send a message on a piece of paper, you can now send it electronically over a wire and get near instant communication. In the aftermath of the American Civil War, they'll actually lay a transatlantic cable that will allow for that kind of communication to happen between North America and Europe, which is amazing technology. But of course, the train. The train allows huge amounts of people and materials to transfer quickly.
But what about all the bison? Well, Alex, surely we can't have all those 2,000-pound hunks of meat waltzing around on train tracks. Think of how dangerous that would be to our schedules. So those numbers were knocked down a couple million to open things up.
This photo has always been just mind-blowing to me. It's all bison skulls. And it just goes to show what happened. Bison in 1800, estimated 60 million. Bison in 1900, 300. I don't know how many there are today, but there's quite a bit more than that. We have a bison farm here, not too far from where I live.
Up a bit, but only after we graciously borrowed their trails for railroad paths. Thanks, bison. What? 60 million? They killed that many just to avoid some train damage or delays? Well, that and to force Native Americans into submission turns out pretty easy to do when you decimate their primary source of food and a major sacred symbol for many tribes. For perspective, think the devastation that befalls America today when Starbucks stopped selling our current sacred symbol, the pumpkin spice latte, but multiply it by a couple thousand. Hey, Tahoma, I feel like we got off on the wrong foot, so I wanted to lighten things up a bit with a little joke that I came up with, seeing as how you...
Something else about these Native American tribes. A number of these tribes that are in the West by this point didn't actually start there. You know, for example, I got to visit the Chickasaw Indian Reservation in Oklahoma. Beautiful people, phenomenal facility. I had such an amazing experience visiting the Chickasaw people in Oklahoma. But they started over like in Alabama, Mississippi area, but Trail of Tears, a lot of folks got sent west of the Mississippi River. But a lot of these tribes are native to that area, like the Lakota, the Sioux.
People love those buffalo so much. What did the buffalo say to his son? Is it bye, son? No. He didn't say anything. Because he doesn't have a son. Because he's dead. I killed him. I killed all the bison, Tahoma. To the American settlers, the West symbolized independence and freedom from government, a proposition so tempting that people were willing to uproot their lives and travel hundreds of miles over land made traversable by state-sponsored railroads to homesteads made possible by federal legislation on land made open by government ammunition.
So the Homestead Act was something that had been talked about for a long time, but it's only during the Civil War that Lincoln is going to get that passed. And it's one of the few really significant acts of domestic policy that gets passed, because Lincoln's administration is primarily concerned with fighting and winning the American Civil War. But he does work on some domestic things, and the Homestead Act is a big part of it. And that really kind of opens up a lot of these areas to the West. You're going to start seeing states admitted to the Union pretty quickly in those decades to come. And you can see where all the major railroads are being built and the dates for those. A lot of them, you know, Transcontinental Railroad's completed in 1869, right up here, Promontory Summit, northwest of Salt Lake City. And that connects East and West. And if you ever get a chance, if you watch the TV show Hell on Wheels, it's a fascinating look at that time period around the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad.
You smell that, Ezekiel? That's freedom right there. No big brother here. Okay, this sucks, you win. Please take me back to my PlayStation. Oh, great. You just saved me 15 minutes. Hey, get! Shoot, he just took our catalytic converter. I thought this was the Wild West, not North Philly. Well, at least now we can get past the 8-minute mark and Daddy needs his mid-roll, so lessons back on, Alex. Seeing as how you're here to stay, we're gonna need to hook you up with a career. Now, there were a ton of options, and with how expansive and diverse the various regions are, you really shouldn't generalize life in the Wild West. Anyway, let's heavy pick between a cowboy, miner, or prostitute. Oh, cowboy. Classic choice, Alex. Let me just cue up the VHS trailer for...
So, fair point about the miners. Mining was probably the most dangerous thing that could happen to you in the West. It wasn't getting into a gunfight, though those things did happen. It was much more likely to be you dying in a mine accident of some kind.
For cowboys here... At 13 minutes past the 13th hour on the 13th day of the 13th month, the McCormick County rabbit puncher James H. Wallace strode into the small town of Armadillo Baldy looking for rabbits. As he turned the corner of Baba Skanky's Shank and Dank Barber Shop, he spotted little Cindy Klein with her beloved bunny, Sir Hopsalot, enjoying a scoop of radish ice cream, an Armadillo Baldy staple.
Ice cream.
Wallace grabbed poor Cindy's bouncy rodent and hoisted him in the dusty air, fist clenched in zealous anticipation to spread his rabbit-punching vendetta to Busball County. It was then that the heretofore unnoticed cowboy, Two-Stone Filbert Cheesesteak, the sandwich-hating gunslinger, stepped forward from the shadow of the Balloon Saloon to challenge the outsider to a duel. Legendary on neither side of the Mississippi, Filbert Cheesesteak stood in the dirt road across from his mammal-fisting adversary, hand hovering over his six-shooter. The bell rang and Wallace was shot down, losing on the draw after remembering he didn't own a firearm. Seeing the rabbit puncher slowly bleed out on the street, the cowboy approached him and, in a show of mercy, proceeded to stab him 37 times in the knee until he died from old age 2 minutes later. Cowboy Filbert Cheesesteak the bunny defender then rode off into the sunset, forever to be remembered for his heroic defense of Cindy Klein's honor. by shooting and stabbing an unarmed foreigner. Well, Alex, what'd you think? That's awesome! I'd love to be a heroic gunslinging cowboy. Pew 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 pew. What? Oh no, that's just a teaser for a Western film I'm making. That's not what a cowboy is. What you just witnessed is the modern interpretation of an Old West cowboy, made popular by Hollywood and dime novels. A valiant and mysterious gunslinging nomad who traveled from town to town to bring justice, often while fabulously dressed. But in reality, all that's needed to understand what a cowboy does is the name itself. You herd cows.
Yep.
Well, this sucks. Don't speak too soon. This is probably the most chill part of your entire workday, which is about 15 to 20 hours, by the way. Your day of...
Yeah, I mean, you had to protect that cattle. You were often working for these really wealthy ranch owners that would just have a lot of enemies at times and would compete against each other. And it's actually this kind of thing that leads to the Lincoln County War, which is what leads to the fame of Billy the Kid.
Cattle driving, horsewiping, and repair providing was lonely and dull, which might sound like a dream at first to you introverts, I know my audience, until you take into account the pay of $25 to $40 a month, exhausting manual labor, and feeling almost as disgusted with yourself as I hope KFC's head chef feels. You'll get 6 hours of sleep at most, and unlike your working life, you won't be lonely in your bedroll. Your horse is your best friend until one wrong move turns you into its best training wheel, and of course, there's the cowboy's worst nightmare, the stampede. Thousands of pounds of moo meat charging at top speed, crushing everything in their path, and all it took was one small spook to set one off. Craig, they hit the Pentagon. While overall pretty mundane, there were a handful of exciting aspects of a cowboy's career. For example, you've probably been sitting there thinking, but they play with cool swingy ropes. That's right, sport. They did in fact use lassos to wrangle cattle. However, it's often left out why they had to do this. I like this game. So what now? You busting my balls, Jesse? Wait, one of the biggest events in a cowboy's career was the long drive, where they drove large herds of...
Lil Nas X. Gonna take my horse to the old town road. I'm gonna ride till I can't no more.
Cattle to railroad stations to be sold off. While this is finally starting to sound like some cool cowpuncher stuff, a cowpuncher is another name for cowboy. Riding on horseback for thousands of miles is not as easy as it seems, something horse jockeys, Aiden Ross, or others used to riding can attest to. And sure, it might not be an adventure as fantastical as Clint Eastwood's, riding off with a beautiful woman of questionable age who you wooed from a small town after 2 conversations with. We've still got hundreds of open miles to roam with beautiful young Bessie here. Moo. Aw, she is sweet. She sure is. Now load her up, Alex. Where are we taking her to? I think the better question is, what are we making her into? A cheeseburger, Alex. What? Beautiful old Bessie is too precious to make it to a burger.
I don't know if I've shared this story before, but I have a real aversion to eating food that I saw when it was alive. And cows are my favorite animal, but I also absolutely love steak and hamburgers and things like that. I used to live in Pennsylvania, and there was a farm behind our house. And in fact, our yard went right up to the electric fence, on the other side of which is where the cattle were. And the next door neighbors, who were members of our church, and I was a youth pastor, their kids were in the youth group, had us over for dinner, and we were eating steak. And I found out halfway through eating the steak that it was one of the cows I used to talk to in the backyard. It was upsetting to me. But the steak was really good.
You're right, maybe a filet mignon. I don't want to be a cowboy. Alright then, what's next? I guess miner. Brilliant choice. No, you're later. Trailing off the tail end of the California gold rush, mining was a tantalizing proposition for men desperate to make their fortune. It was such a popular draw that many U.S. states were initially settled by prospectors and miners hoping to strike gold or silver.
And just to speak from my own family's history, I live here in Northeast Ohio, and this is kind of about as far west as my family settled. But they did occasionally have folks who went further out. So my 4th great-grandfather's brother is said to have been killed by Indians in 1850 when he went west to California for the gold rush. He went west from here in Northeast Ohio. And then my wife had a 3rd great-grandfather who came from Wales, who was a coal miner, to work here. And one of his brothers went out to Arizona and ended up dying in an explosion in a mine. So that shows you those are the 2 people in my family that I know went west, and they both died violent deaths.
partner, I heard there was gold in these parts. Sure, what's with the pickaxe? Why, to mine my fortune, of course. Alright, man, if that's what you're into, go on in. Well, thank you kindly, partner. Little damp in here. While a few managed to strike it rich, the unfortunate reality was that you were far more likely to find yourself working for poor wages and terrifying conditions. Yep. Keep in mind, these were the times where industrial safety was more of a punchline than a guideline, so you had a lot to worry about being an Old West miner, such as the 3 E's: explosions, electrocutions, and asphyxiations. Asphyxiation starts with an A. Some mines would utilize a long series of ladders to descend hundreds of feet into the earth, which meant if you were too tired at the end of the day, you might not reach the top successfully. So hopefully you haven't been spending 12 hours punching rocks or something. Silica exposure was also a problem, and miners would often inhale large amounts of it on the job, which would tickle their lungs a little bit. And by tickle, I mean silicosis, which became tuberculosis, which they died from at 10 times the national average. You'd also...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, tuberculosis was, and a lot of times you'll see it referred to as consumption. But more often than not, that was tuberculosis.
Be exposed to carbon monoxide, poor ventilation, dirty drinking water, mercury poisoning, lead poisoning, arsenic poisoning, alcohol poisoning. Throw a dart at the periodic table and it's probably in your blood. Have to go? There's plenty of room. Need to count to 10? Why don't you use your fingers? Just kidding. In a lot of ways, frontier mining was like a casino. You go in hoping to strike it rich, but inside you find flashing lights, bodily fluids, and in the end, the house always wins. Okay, never mind. I'll do anything but mining. Alright then. What's your next pick? Now hold on. The world's oldest profession is a common trope in Western films, but their prevalence and impact tends to be a bit overstated. For example, the popular idea that prostitutes were the first people to arrive and develop the West is more folklore than fact.
Not the first people to arrive, but it's a natural consequence anywhere that you have a kind of a booming industry where a lot of men go, or you have war and you have a lot of men go off to the front. It's a very natural consequence of that you'll have women not far behind. And in many cases, unfortunately, these were women who just didn't have a lot of other good options. If you were a woman, especially a single woman, who was trying to make it on their own and wasn't married, didn't have any like family to care for you, your options were pretty limited. And a lot of these women didn't do this because it was their first choice. It was the last resort.
In reality, they often waited until a community was more developed before setting up shop, if you will.
Yeah, makes
Most
sense.
women in the West pursued a variety of enterprises to make money. But don't you worry, Alex. Hookers certainly did exist. And while it wasn't most women's profession, less competition means more clientele. But why choose the scandalous life? Well, maybe you're a widow in need of cash, or a savvy entrepreneur looking to score big after a crypto ranch didn't pan out. But either way, you came to the Wild West for the same reason as everyone else: opportunity and glory.
Yep.
Holes. For work, you've got quite a few options. You could be a residence prostitute, where on the upside, you get to work from home, but on the downside, you get to work from home where your children live. If permanent psychological trauma isn't your parenting style, you could always join a brothel. These establishments were as traditional as it gets. Just an empty room and a bunch of bedrooms to learn about the birds and the bees. Uh-oh, here comes the boss lady with her Home Depot paint card. Don't mind her, she's just checking your skin color. Too much melanin puts you in the special room. Maybe you'd rather be a saloon girl, who a lot of the time were not literal prostitutes, but rather women who would charm and revitalize the clientele of a saloon. But this was still considered pretty taboo. Merely having a woman in a saloon at all was already unheard of back east, where they treasured their masculinity so much that they couldn't have anyone around who liked men. That would be gay. Often called painted ladies, as the harlots had the audacity to wear makeup, saloon girls were often paid in alcohol sales, so you'll need to keep them binge drinking for as long as possible. You gotta charm them, talk them up a bit, form a one-sided emotional relationship. Trust me.
There's a lot of parallels between what was happening in the Old West as far as immigrants and prostitution, as was happening in places like Whitechapel in London at about the same time, where you have the Jack the Ripper murders take place. You have a lot of women who are desperate, who have no other real options, who in many cases have an problem with alcohol and are spending what little money that they do earn on alcohol rather than on bettering their situation if they could in the first place.
Me, I'm a YouTuber. While your clients are catching feelings, you'll be catching diseases like their Pokemon. Look, you've even got a few legendaries. Luckily, it's nothing a little visit from the Mercury Fairy can't fix. Getting stressed? Not to worry. Many prostitutes perfected the art of relaxation to help them deal with the woes of the trade. She does look calm. Yeah, opiates will do that. What, they just abused painkillers? Come now, that wasn't their only method. There's also codeine, chloroform, laudanum, tonics, and of course, good old-fashioned alcohol. But most importantly, you gotta ensure your social class in the red light community is well received. You don't wanna be like Marianne over there, a widowed mother taking all the business she can get to support her kids. Disgusting. You wanna be like Ash over here, who worked her way up the social ladder to eventually take on better ventures. Like owning prostitutes. Freedom is the ultimate goal of all red light women after all, and all it takes is a little elbow grease, business savvy, and not being Chinese. Assuming you secure a job, you now gotta find a place
you have a lot of Chinese immigrants that come to the Old West, the Wild West as we call it, and this leads to a real severe amount of discrimination against them, and a lot of laws get passed back east in Washington to deal with the problem of all the Chinese immigration that's coming in on the West. They were very much second-class citizens.
to live. Your options, of course, will depend on the region, and if you're far out in the frontier, you'll need to get your hands dirty and build your own house. If you got trees around, you can build yourself a log cabin. It's pretty simple, really. All you need to do is gather up several tons of stone for a foundation, chop down dozens of trees by hand, and lift 500-pound logs into place all by your lonesome. But in the end, you'll have a roughly 10 by 20 foot cabin, which is plenty of room for you. And your wife. And your 10 kids. Recycling stuff from your journey out west will also save you a lot of time.
I knew there had to be an Oregon Trail reference at some point in this thing. If you are my generation, you know this game, and I think it's made a comeback now. And it's still kind of in the pop culture sphere, and there's always going to be some reference to "you have died of dysentery."
Empty barrel? That's a rocking chair. Storage trunk? How about a dresser? Dead kid? You mean fertilizer. All in all, your log cabin will be cramped, cold, and pretty much just block the wind a little. But hey, if the Unabomber could live in one, so can you. But out on the plains, you don't have any trees. Just a bunch of grass, really. So the settlers had to coordinate an intricate supply chain effort to source materials. Nah, they just used the grass. Introducing the sod house, which is one letter off from sad. Much like your first time playing Minecraft, a sod house had a pretty creative design. Your floors were made out of dirt. Now for your walls, let's use some dirt. As for your ceiling, better go with the classic, dirt. You can practically already see the smile on the wife's face when she sees this. Here we are, dear, our new home. This? What is this? A sod house, made out of high quality dirt imported all the way from the backyard. This is disgusting. Why on earth would you drag our family out here to live like pigs? This is what you wanted! You always said you wished we were dirtier in bed! Despite the near total isolation, you will get some visitors from time to time. As one settler wrote, every afternoon the rattlesnakes would come out of their hidden dens in the walls and roof and sun themselves on the western windowsill. Have fun, Cinderella. As you can imagine, even the best of sod houses would leak when it rained, but at least that means you'll have a fun little indoor water park. You know, so long as the roof doesn't decide to join in. Your journey out west.
We do not appreciate nearly enough how hard life was for a lot of people even 150 years ago. I mean, it's so different. Rattlesnakes coming out of the walls, and we freak out if we find a couple of mouse droppings. We're like, get traps, get a cat, deal with it quickly. When I lived in Pennsylvania, we would get rats occasionally in our house, and it was horrifying. They scream. Okay, so they stopped going to the snap traps. They figured that out pretty quick, right? So I knew that they would come into our kitchen through an entrance from the basement up into the bathroom. And so I put glue traps across the hallway that they would come in through. Well, then they'd get caught in the glue traps, and they'd start screaming. I'd be in bed, hearing rats screaming downstairs. And then I'd have to take a shovel and beat it to death. I'm traumatized to this day from that, and it's nothing compared to what people have dealt with for most of human history.
So it's quite the environment change, from the big city to the back rooms, and with all this space, the kids had plenty to do. running in a circle, running in a square, developing prairie madness, you know, the life. Despite the lackluster conditions, frontiersmen did do their best to introduce some comfort to the home. For example, as a substitute for wallpaper, some families just plastered their walls with newspapers to help keep out drafts. So now you can add reading the wall to your list of fun home activities. But at this point, we're pretty much just one straitjacket away from an insane asylum. While the Wild West was a rather violent place with high murder rates, it wasn't as if you had to dodge bullets every day like Hollywood would make you believe. Unless you're a native. In fact, many Wild West towns would have you turn in any guns you had upon entry, so don't fret too much about bandits, no need to worry over gunslingers. In fact, the only gun you really need to be worried about is your own, because life in the Wild West was boring as shit. There were still a few hobbies you could pursue, like alcoholism. Drinking was very popular in the Wild West, so much so that doctors poured almost as much liquor as barkeeps, which was fantastic for people like priests who couldn't be seen entering the latter. And luckily for you, the Wild West was home to many creative individuals who came up with some rather interesting concoctions. Take Nicholas Ambrose, for instance, who was drinking liquor when he thought to himself, yeah, not enough spiders. Introducing tarantula juice, a cocktail famous for having a strong bite and causing muscle spasms that felt like having dozens of baby tarantulas crawling on your skin. Go on, take a sip, Alex. Muscle spasms, huh? Sounds like something a sugar rush would do. No, it sounds like something a neurotoxin would do. And that's because this fun little potion was made up of wood grain alcohol, rosin, tobacco juice, sulfuric acid, hydrogen cyanide, and everyone's favorite rat poison, strychnine, which is making its third appearance on this channel. With all those flavors, tarantula juice was said to produce effects similar to methamphetamine. Now, if you aren't in the mood for lockjaw, you could always go for a classic drink, but be careful, ordering liquor out here was kinda like playing Minesweeper. Uh-oh, looks like someone hit a mine. Don't worry, you're not gonna explode. I think. I mean, you did just drink gunpowder. I ordered whiskey! That you did! However, many Wild West saloons would cut their whiskey with things like gunpowder, cayenne, or even ammonia to save on liquor.
Kind of like today, how you have people dying from fentanyl overdoses because the fentanyl gets mixed in with the other drugs that are being sold.
Costs. Here you go. Hey Keith, this whiskey smell funny to you? Oh yeah, keep it quiet, but I've been cutting the whiskey with this cheap almond juice to save money. Almond juice? This is ammonia. Like to unclog a sink. You can't be serving this to customers. My cells hurt. Let me see that. Oh, I thought it said almond juice. How could you possibly think that? Are you dyslexic? Severely. What? Keith, you know our policy. Sir, I still haven't seen any dangerous accordions. Gee, Alex, you're not looking too good. Well, fortunately, we'll be able to fix you up at our next stop, the local medicine show. Combining healthcare and showbiz, these exhibitions featured a traveling salesman who would use...
If you ever heard the term snake oil salesman, this is where it comes from. And if you look at newspapers, not even in the Wild West, just in more civilized parts of America, in the towns, you know, like... newspapers in Pennsylvania and Ohio and Virginia and New York, places like that. They're constantly showing advertisements and testimonials from local citizens about the newest thing on the market that's going to help cure whatever ails you.
Entertainment to draw a crowd and peddle whatever poppycock miracle medicines they had on hand. This entertainment can include everything from storytelling to magic shows to freak shows, which I covered already in this little guy. These acts would continue until the salesmen sold off all their patent medicine, which weren't actually patented, but the word sounded cool so they used it anyway. To help prove the effectiveness of their tonics, they would often insert paid actors into the audience, who they could then pretend to pick out at random to miraculously cure of all their ailments. Gather round, folks, and feast your eyes, for I've got tonics, treatments, and dyes. As for your ailments, do not fret nor cry, for I have arrived, Mr. Dr. Delight.
And it's easy to look at that and think, why would you fall for that kind of stuff? But remember, people dealt with a lot of illnesses that we don't have to deal with today. And they were desperate for a cure. No different than today, somebody who's got a terminal cancer diagnosis who's willing to go to Mexico or go somewhere and try some experimental treatment or some homeopathic medicine that there's really no evidence will help, but nothing else has helped. They're willing to try anything because they want to be healed. They want to be cured.
What in tarnation did he say? Oh, Kansas. Me have medicine. Oh, he got them cures. Wow, them be some fancy tonics. I got that chlamydia. Do they work, though? I love drinking fluids. Now, to demonstrate the healing abilities of my patent medicine, I shall request the assistance of an audience member. Me? Yes, you, sir. Come on up and tell us what ails you. I've got this really bad cough. Wow, sounds genuine. No worries, stranger. I've got this cure for you. My gluten-free snake oil mercury miracle shall wash away all coughs, pains, and kinks whilst invigorating the body. Oh my gosh, my cough is gone. As you can see, he is now cured. In my vision, Jesus, I can see for miles. Yes, another perk. Your vision shall be sharpened. Holy, I understand differential calculus. The tonic enhances the mind. And I'm fluent in Italian. Mamma mia, spaghetti and meatball. All right, that's enough now, stranger. Oh my God, my penis so big. Jeez, they fell for that? Crazy, right? Getting their healthcare advice through performative entertainment? That's ridiculous. The people of the past were clearly way stupider than we are today. However, those weren't the only shows in town. You could also go see a minstrel show, a form of theater consisting of various skits and acts, which were also quite inclusive. Look, not only did they have white people, but also black people. Played by white people. Don't worry, Alex. These shows eventually died out, but some say their legacy lives on in the form of Canadian prime ministers. You could also go to a rodeo and watch men simulate a battle against animals on the frontier by mildly annoying them. Or you could go explore yourself.
And a lot of these shows would eventually employ people like Buffalo Bill Cody and Annie Oakley, and you would even get people like Geronimo involved in them.
Just look out for everything. Want more thrills? How about you go see a dead body? Or maybe watch them get made. Feeling vice-like? Why don't you try your hand at gambling? Uh-oh, looks like we got a sore loser. Where's the sheriff when you need him? Oh, there he is. All in all, the hobbies weren't numerous, but at the end of the day, you're just looking for something to dull the pain before you get back to work the next day. Now let's talk about the hygiene. Oh, hey, is that your scientist friend? Yes, Doc, please get me out of here. I can't take this. I don't want to be a hooker. I just want to play my PlayStation. Please fix the time machine. I can't live in a dirt house. I don't want to, like, spider. Calm down, Alex. I would.
There was no just point of order. No PlayStations in 1985. It hadn't been invented yet. You might have gone and played his Nintendo.
But transporting back in time has taken a toll on my mental fortitude. My fundamental cognizance of arithmetic and the phenomena of physical interactivity has diminished. English, Doc! I don't understand math anymore, Alex! Oh, Doc. Looks like someone could use a little refresher on their fundamentals. Even a time-traveling prodigy physicist can get a little rusty. But luckily for you, Brilliant.org is one of the best online resources out there.
All right, so that was pretty entertaining. I enjoyed that. I'm glad you guys recommended that one to me. Big shout out to Michiel. I don't know how to pronounce your name in Dutch. I apologize. You can let me know if I got that wrong. Michiel in the Netherlands. Love the Netherlands, one of my favorite countries. Some of my friends are there. And Dominic in Germany. Thank you guys so much for your support. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.